Hey everybody, and my video's not working. Oh, there we go. Kavindra showed up. I was worried that I had screwed something up, but it maybe just be bandwidth. Welcome to another great episode. We are doing another conversation about Alexa Conversations. I am Jeff Blankenberg, and today I have with me Justin Jeffress and Kavindra Singh, and we're here to talk about Alexa Conversations. So Justin, I know that you guys have a demo and some cool stuff that we want to show off in a little while. But I'd love for you to kind of share, like, why we're here. This is not a normal time for us to just jump on and do some streaming. So can you share with everybody kind of what the goal of today is?
So yes, we've been running this multi-month hackathon for Alexa Conversations, and we have this wonderful Slack group full of wonderful people asking lots of different questions about Alexa Conversations. And Kavindra and I put our heads together, and we saw that there was a lot of similar questions being asked, and so we got together and created a demo to show how to do some of these things that people are asking about. So one of those things was, people have been, now that the deadline for like submitting your skill initially for certification has passed, and the deadline for getting your skill certified is rapidly approaching. People are getting back a lot of failures based upon the fact that their skill isn't prompting or ending the session properly. So we have a demo to show how you end the session. And then we also have a demo that shows how to clear the context of the conversation by using delegation.
Nice.
So say, for example, you have a skill where you're have a shopping cart and you want to place multiple items in that shopping cart. If you don't clear there's no way to manually flush, there's no function that you can call that manually clears the context. Delegation is a way to help clear out that context. And so we have a demo for that.
Got it. It's interesting how we've kind of come full circle, right? We've introduced this new technology with Alexa Conversations, and now we're back to wait, how do I end a session, right? Which is something that seems so simple and straightforward for a traditionally built Alexa skill, and yet it seems like it's something that is been a little elusive for a few people. So I find that kind of stuff interesting when a very solved problem becomes unsolved again because we introduce a new stack or a new set of technologies. So
Right.
Okay, so this is going to be great. So with that, where do we want to go from here? Do we want to jump right into talking about the demo, or do we need to frame something up first? How would you like to handle this?
Yeah, I think. Oh, just by the way, I posted into the chat the link to the to join the Slack group for those of you who haven't joined the Slack group and want to, have questions about Alexa Conversation. But yeah, I think at this point we can turn it over to Kavindra to have him go through and show the demo, and we can interject and ask questions and do all that.
Awesome. All right. Well, I have we're sharing our screen now, so Kavindra, I think everyone can see your screen, so we should be on our way.
Great. All right. So we can probably get started with the session and use case. That was definitely one of the most frequently asked questions. So ending session in Alexa Conversation is definitely different than what we used to do in the intent world, right? So I have a little demo of how you will end a session. So essentially what you're trying to do is, in a dialogue, you will from your API, when your dialogue is complete, you need to delegate to your skill. Because there is no native support for session end in Alexa Conversation, so you have to go back to the skill and return session end from the intent. Okay, so here I have a small session dialogue where I have only one.
I feel like I'm wrong. I'm still seeing a persistent image of your dev console.
Yeah.
But I'm not seeing it change. So my concern, maybe try sharing your screen again. I may have changed that.
Oh, I see.
There we
You
go.
see it?
Yeah, and if you can bump
There we
up
go.
your browser zoom like 1 or 2,
Sure.
that would also be awesome. There we go. Just so everybody can see
Okay.
it well.
Great. So here I have very small dialogue, and the only goal is to end the session. So there is not any conversation in this dialogue. It's just like, hey, do you want to end? Yes, and then you end the session. So usually when you have a dialogue, you kind of start with a goal of invoking an API. And in the last turn of the dialogue, you will invoke that API. And so as I was saying, when you end the session, so you have to, your skill will be invoked with this API when dialogue is about to end. And from the API, you will have to delegate back to your skill. So I'll show that a little bit in a little bit.
Kavindra, are you still there?
So here, so you have, this is my, can you not hear me?
I could. It just there was a long silence, so I wanted to make sure everything was still connected.
Oh, I have been speaking. Okay. What was the last time you
No,
hear?
you were just talking about how we're going to get through that stuff, and then we just had about a 5-second pause. So.
Oh, I see.
You said you were just about to open something, so I think just wherever you are opening this thing, I think you can start right there.
Okay, great. So yeah, I was just showing the dialogue a little bit more. So here I have invoke API set to invoke my API, which is end session, right? So that's what normally you need to do. Confirmation step here, where I confirm the API to ask if a user wants to end the session, and user will affirm that through an entrance set. And then I finally invoke the API here. So there is no argument or anything like that. So it's just a very simple API. And the only goal for this is to session, right?
Okay.
So let's hop over to the code a little bit more. So here's how I handle that API in the backend. So what I will do is I will delegate. I'm not sure if you are able to see it. So let me zoom in a little bit more. So you will delegate to an intent. It could be any intent you want to delegate to. For my use case, I just created like a delegation entry intent, right?
Mm-hmm.
And when I receive that in the intent here, I would say goodbye and session end true here. So let's open this skill in
Yes, I want to
in the
point
testing
out
window.
one thing that I want to point out here is that the response at that point when you delegate from your intent handler that is set up to handle the request from LX Conversations, since it's delegating back to the interaction model, LX Conversations isn't going to be what responds. So the response that has been associated with that API success call to end the session isn't actually going to be used. It's going to short circuit that and go straight to the interaction model. And so what's going to respond is going to be the interaction model. In fact, Kavindra can speak to this. I don't think it actually even goes through the NSR or the ASL NLU, ASR NLU. It just goes straight to a request to your skills backend.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, that's a good point. When you delegate, it kind of so usually how Alexa conversation works is like it's always predicting actions. So whenever there is an event, it will predict next thing to do. And here what we have said is like after we invoke the API, we predict the response here. But when you delegate from the API, it kind of short circuits that loop and it will directly jump into your intent world and will not render this response here. So I think that's what you're trying to say, Justin, right?
Yes.
Great. Yeah. So when you come back to the skill, you will need to handle the session just like the way you used to. So you can say some message and a session end flag as true. So let me show you in the runtime really quick.
Welcome to the session end demo skill. You can say hello.
Okay, let me see what my script was. Hello. I think. Oh, and my session.
Sorry, I don't understand. I only know if you say.
1 second. Oh, it's high there. Okay, my bad.
The ever elusive hi there that makes the skill exit.
Demo skill. You can say hello.
Yeah.
Hello. Do you want to end the session?
So we are here confirming the API, and then I will say yes. And then it will invoke the Lambda. There may be some, let's see.
Yeah, and so one thing that I want to point out here is that, this example isn't something that we would actually literally do in a real skill. This is to just demonstrate the fact that, like, here's how you would go through and end that session. So if you were to like bring this idea into your own like skill, what would happen is once you've completed that API call and you want to end the session, you don't have any further things to prompt the user. This is how you would do that. So here we're not actually saying like, hey, would you like to end the session? It would probably be something along the lines of like, do you want to check out? User says yes, and then say something along the lines of like, have the API call checking them out. Say, oh, hey, I've sent a receipt to your email or something like that, and then boom, end the session. So this is just distilled it down into just something really, really simple.
Okay, so I have a quick question for, there's a couple good questions in the chat, but I want to ask one of my own first. For developers that maybe haven't used Alexa Conversations yet, and they're looking at this and saying, wow, this looks pretty cool, I think this is something I want to try. Is it a fair statement to say that you either use Alexa Conversations or you use an intent model? Because it seems like, sorry for the dog, by the way, but I feel like that's a question that should probably be clarified here. Hello?
Yeah.
Okay.
I was wondering if Kavindra was going to jump in, so I didn't want to overspeak him. But yeah, I'll talk to it, and then if Kavindra wants to add, Kavindra step in. So I would say that Alexa Conversations is another tool in your tool belt of things to use to build your skills. So like Alexa Conversations is great for multi-turn interactions where there are multiple slots that you need to collect, where there's possibility that the conversation may deviate from your happy path. There's a really funny meme that some of the people in the Slack group have been sharing where they've got this picture of a truck bed with a huge trailer on the back of it and a small little like Fisher-Price push car, the one I'm talking about, the yellow and blue and orange little push car that you pedal with your feet. And it says like using Alexa Conversations to collect one slot. That's like the meme that people are showing. So it's like, if you only need one slot, you probably don't need Alexa Conversations. But if there's a bunch of different things where there's like, lots of slots, lots of possibility for corrections, it really shines in that situation. And so one of the great things about Alexa Conversations is, it's not a one-way door decision. You can use it along with your interaction model, and you can delegate to and from back and forth. Kavindra, do you have anything that you want to add?
Yeah, definitely. So that's exactly how you should, like, why you should use Alexa Conversation. And usually, like in the conversation, there will be like a lot of non-linear paths, right? So in the intent world, when you are building a conversation, you have to handle a lot of that in your code. You have to build like state machine and things like that. So Alexa conversation kind of takes that away from you, and it will kind of do it for you automatically. So that's where it kind of
all right. So the reason that I
quite a
asked that
bit,
question
yeah.
is the first thing that popped into my head is why don't I just have like a stop intent or a goodbye intent? And I think the answer is because when I'm in Alexa conversations, I delegate it to that, and it's living there. And there isn't an opportunity for me to hit my intents while I'm in the middle of what we'll call an Alexa conversation until I delegate back. Is that accurate?
So that's a very good question. So basically, when user says something like bye or something like that, there is a native support for ending the session for those kind of utterances. So basically, if your intent is generating stop intent, it is kind of mapped to a bye template here, which says goodbye from Alexa conversation, and it will also end the session. So it's kind of like hardwired. So whenever user says something related to stop intent, it will map to this bye response template, and it will end the session. But if from your skill you want to end the session yourself, so like you are taking control, then you will go do the delegation work, right? So
Right.
this is from the user
So
side, other is from the Alexa side.
yeah, and so if you wanted to like, leave it up, like if you didn't want to take that control, what you'd have to do in your template or your response that comes back from that API success would be to prompt them to say goodbye. So then, or stop or whatever's, there's a list of things that have been mapped to that Alexa Conversations by that Kavindra is showing. And so, you could prompt them to say one of those things, and then if they say it, it would end it. But it requires the user to say something. So if you don't want to require the user to say something to end the session, that's why you would delegate to your interaction model and then just end it.
So in a very basic example, when I think about something like the old fact skill that we used to have, that you would ask it for a fact and it would just quit. It wasn't so much that the user was choosing to quit. We decided we were going to give a fact and end the skill. The same concept is applied here, where there may be an endpoint someplace in the conversation where it makes sense to just end things. We're done having our conversation, and that's where we need to we need to be able to delegate back to our skill and say, hey, by the way, I need you to kill the session. And that's the demo that you showed just a second ago, Kavindra, right? Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Got it. So
that's correct.
There was a question from the chat from Dana Voice that I want to ask, because I think this is smart, and I would love to hear your thoughts on why this is or isn't a thing. But what Dana suggested was, why isn't there just a checkbox on one of my dialogues that is should end session?
Right. That's a great question. So essentially, that's kind of a response management in Alexa Conversation, and the features we are looking to add. So basically, what we are saying here is like we can say, hey, can you end my session in the turn itself, right? So that's like a build time configuration. So runtime provides you a way to do it from code, but there is definitely an opportunity here to add checkbox or something like that to end the session directly, and it will do all that work for you. It's just that it's not available in Alexa Conversation right now.
But that's something that we potentially have on our roadmap. No, we don't make any promises here, but we're talking about the idea that we've identified that this is something that might be helpful, and we'll see what we can do to make things more helpful as we go forward. That's awesome. Okay, great. Right. So is there anything else that we wanted to cover on the end my session stuff? I think this is pretty great. So if we get the user to say something like goodbye or stop, we could just map that to one of the, I lost the term. You had it on your screen a second ago, and I've lost what that term was. Was it just a dialogue? Where you had the bye template?
The bye template?
Oh, yes. Alexa Conversations by...
So is that something that's built in, or is that something that you had to make yourself?
By response. So that's already built into your skill. So what you can do is,
we got another freeze up here.
If you want,
oh no. So what I think what Kavindra's trying to say here is
change the way Alexa goodbye. You can kind of go.
We can, yeah.
Can you hear me now?
Like if you could, it froze up just as you were starting to explain it. So if you could do that again, that'd be awesome.
Okay. Yeah. Yes. So if you want to change what Alexa says when you when she's rendering the goodbye message, you can just go here and edit that. So you can say like, hey, goodbye, or something like that. You can also add audio and things like that. Like it's an APLA template, which allows you to render richer audio
Nice.
in your skill. Right. I also share one trick that you can improve to capture buy more from the user. So how buy works here is like it's kind of mapped to Amazon.stop intent and Amazon.cancel intent. So whenever user says something related to those two intents, um, uh, it will map to buy template here. So if you go to your interaction model and if you kind of go to the stop intent, and if you train something like, hey, I want out, right? If you train something like that, and if user says that in the Alexa conversation, that will be mapped to that buy. So you can improve that accuracy a little bit more. And uh, capture more and more utterances from the user.
Yes.
Yeah, I think I'm done. Can you hear me? Okay, great. Yeah, so you can add more utterances here to capture more, to provide more coverage to your buy response
and all of that
in
is
Alexa
built in.
conversation.
So the buy template points directly to the Amazon stop intent for the most part. It maps based on the training data. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, and this is something that I didn't know. I just learned that. So I just want to reiterate what Kavindra said. So if I go to the Amazon.stop intent here and I add various utterances to, this stop intent, those utterances become available to stop from the Alexa conversation side of things as well.
Yeah.
Wow, that's really cool. I didn't know that. So I learned something on this call too.
All right, we have another question here.
So some of the things, some of the.
Well, I was going to change the subject, so go ahead and finish, and then we'll jump into the question.
Yeah, I was just saying like some of the built-in templates, built-in responses here are actually mapped to intents and some of the deterministic requests like launch requests. So for example, welcome here is mapped to launch request in the intent world, and buy is mapped to stop intent, and provide help
We get so close.
is mapped to help intent. Interaction model, it's mapped to help intent.
Got it. So when they say something in the conversation that hits the provide help template, does it delegate itself to the help intent, or does it? Let me ask the question because Mame is Am. Mame I Sam. I don't know how to say that. Is asking, could you elaborate on the required responses for like rec more or provide help? And the specific question they're asking, is there no way to make them contextual at the moment? So let me tell a quick story. I like to fill time with my voice. So I have a presentation that I give called 10 Things Every Voice App Should Do. And one of the things that I really harp on is the idea of contextual help. I see many skills out there today that treat their help intent, never mind Alexa conversations for a moment, but they treat their help intent like an about page on their website. So you say help, and it says, hey, we're a pizza shop. We sell pizza, breadsticks, salads, whatever, right? And the problem with that is that someone was already in the middle of ordering a pizza, and they said help, and then they're presented with, hey, we're a pizza shop. We offer this, this, and this, right? Which is a terrible help. And so I really push the idea that it should be contextual. You should know what the user was currently doing, and you should be able to provide them some information about the thing that they were doing. Hey, it looks like you're ordering a pizza. You should be able to add toppings by saying add pepperoni or remove cheese or whatever. Like, give them some clues about the things that they're doing right now. So...
Right. One might say that that's not very helpful at all.
Right, exactly. It's only helpful if you say help maybe right as you enter the skill. So the question that I think they're asking here is, can you elaborate more about how those work? And the specific question they're asking is there no way to make them contextual at the moment? So is there a way for me to make provide help contextual so I know what they were doing and provide help specifically for the thing they were doing?
Not in this release. So it's a static message for now.
Got it. But and again, these are just my dumb questions. Could I somehow map this provide help template to then delegate directly to my help intent?
So what you can do, there is no context, but what you can do is kind of hint, like ask a question to the user in the help that leads to one of your dialogues or something like that, right? So when user says something related to that dialogue, then your dialogue kind of kicks in. So you can do that kind of bridge in your static templates.
Okay, so I'm going to ask a challenging question now. You mentioned earlier that when we were describing kind of the basics of Alexa conversations, that it benefits us because we don't have to build our own state machine. We don't have to do a lot of this other stuff. But then you just said to me that there isn't any context that I can use. And I'm curious how those meet each other, because from my perspective, I have a template that I've built for building skills with intents that is a natural state machine. And every time the skill loads, it rips the context back out of the database, uses it, and then when it's done, it pushes everything back away. How do I achieve a state machine context engine here on the Alexa Conversations side?
Right. A great question. So some of the built-in responses, I know I said they are static right now, but it doesn't mean that they will be static in the future. So we are actively looking to improve this area. And so imagine like having a provide help dialogue instead. So when you have a dialogue, you will have a lot more things to do. So instead of doing a static message, you can ask questions and you can kind of invoke your APIs and things like that. So when you do that, then you are making your help section become more and more rich, right, and more dynamic. So things like that could be done, and we are actively looking to improve this area. But
and
so the
one thing I want to add to this is that while the like some of those messages that are built, Jeff, what you were asking about, like being able to like load something out of a database and then basically restore that context in between sessions is totally supported in Alexa Conversations. What you can do is load up, like set your don't set Alexa Conversations as the default dialogue manager in that case. So you would have the interaction model be the one that starts up when they say Alexa open, and then the skill, you would get a launch request, which you're normally used to, and then in your launch request, like you would load up this state information that you need. And then when the user says something that then triggers this dialogue that you're going to handle with Alexa Conversations, you would delegate to Alexa Conversations, and when you delegate, you're able to pass some information to Alexa Conversations to set that state. And so you can set up like some information and pass it over. And what's really cool is if you have like an API that has a set of required slots, and you programmatically provide that slot value, Alexa Conversations goes, oh, I already have this value. I don't need to prompt the user for it anymore because it has that value.
Smart. Maim just mentioned also, one way it might help to make these dynamic would be to allow it to be associated with an API, right? So that I could go grab or rip the dynamic content that I want at the time. It sounds like these are pretty static yet at this point, right?
Exactly.
Okay.
Yeah, exactly. With the help of like something like built-in dialogues, you will be able to do that. So like if you have a dialogue, you can box the way you want, completely by yourself, and also like invoke as many APIs as you would like. So that's kind of like the idea here.
Got it. This has been very educational for me so far. This is great. Bondad just asked, Bondad is one of our Alexa champions. If your skill is fully delegated to Alexa Conversations, then every launch request is stateless, correct?
Trying to understand the question.
Excuse me. Oh, sorry. The question was, if we are delegating our skill to Alexa Conversations,
it's probably related to context carryover, I think.
Well, what I think he's trying to say here is if you checked that checkbox in the UI that says Alexa Conversations is the default dialogue manager, meaning that when you open the skill, you will never get a launch request. And so he's thinking that in that case, it's completely stateless. So one of the things that you could do is like, you could, if you're using the SDK, all the other tools that are available to you still exist. So you can still create a request interceptor. You could create a response interceptor and stuff of that nature. So you can, load some state information from a database there if you need to. You can also set session attributes as well. And you can access those session attributes from your from your API handlers that are going to handle the requests that come from Alexa Conversations. So you can like set some state information and pass that state information back and forth between the Alexa service and your skills backend. They wouldn't be entirely stateless. The method that you would use to bootstrap information would be a little bit different because you would have to do that via, you wouldn't have your interaction model to load that stuff and then pass and delegate over. You'd have to load that up either in a request or load it up in the handler function that you have. But if you do that, there's no way for you to then manually set your set a value so that way Alexa Conversations knows that context. Kavindra, is it correct to say that you can't delegate to Alexa Conversations from Alexa Conversations, like delegate to a different utterance set?
We do not allow that at the moment, I think. There is definitely a cap on the delegation loop. So like if you are delegating in the same turn, multiple definite loop as well, right? So like if you make a bug or something like that, it can keep on going. So there is definitely a cap. What I'm not sure right now is that like utterance set to utterance set may be possible. I have to go check and maybe update the Slack group if there are questions around that.
Got it. So this helps me ask another question then. So I'm in the process of building a more traditional Alexa skill that is a complete casino, right? You can play all sorts of casino games, blackjack and craps and roulette and slots and everything. But obviously the user has a number of specific attributes that I need to know, right? How many coins do they have available so that they can make bets? How many, I have all sorts of historical data about what they've done and what they haven't done so I can give them achievements and things like that. So if I wanted to bring something over like this, where I have all of that data that I need to know about a user, it sounds to me like starting my skill and making Alexa Conversations the default dialogue manager is probably not in my best interest. I really want to hit a launch request, load all my context, then delegate that off to Alexa Conversations to do the things that Conversations does well, right?
Yes, that's correct.
Okay.
We also provide one small feature. I think it was added later on, which is called bootstrapping Alexa Conversation. So it's essentially doing the same thing, like loading the data, but only in the Alexa Conversation. So when you head to like welcome, you can kind of give it a new API here, right? And you can make it your own API, and it will kind of invoke that API to bootstrap that context for you.
Got it.
So you can do that as well.
Very good. Well, no, that bootstrapping sounds like an interesting option as well. That's cool.
Yeah.
All right, we still have about 25 minutes left. I know that you guys had another topic and demo you wanted to get into, so do we want to kind of frame that up and start there?
Yeah, let's do that. So yeah, I'll let Kavindra speak to this in more detail. But it looks like I noticed on the Twitter feed that we've become Skype logos. I don't know if our video.
Occasionally, just recently, both of you have been becoming Skype logos. Occasionally, we can still hear you.
Okay, great.
And we can see you most of the time, but every once in a while, the Skype logo takes over your face.
Okay, I was like, uh-oh, is that a problem? Okay, cool. People don't need to see my face. That's why I'm growing a beard to hide it. No. What was I going to say? Yeah. So for the second part of this demo, and I'll let Kavindra, get set up to show that and speak to more detail. But this is an example of clearing the context. So say like you have a skill that allows people to enables people to order something from a store, maybe a cup of coffee, whatever. and you want to support like multiple orders. And since Alexa Conversations is tracking that conversational context and keeping track of all the different variables, one question that we often get is, how do I clear that context? Because if I'm trying to do another order and we try to start over, it's not re-asking the questions, or we're seeing that we're getting like some questions skipped and with already previously filled values. So it's like, how do I clear that information and start fresh? And so this is a method that you can use to clear out the conversational context. So I'll let Kavindra take over and go into detail for the demo.
All right.
Yeah, that's like another very frequently asked question for sure. So usually, like what I have seen on the Slack, people do is they have a dialogue, and then you want to repeat that dialogue with the new information. So they want to ask the information from the user again. So for example, like if I'm ordering a coffee in a dialogue, you will get some information from that user, and then you'll order the coffee for the user. And then you want to kind of ask, hey, do you want to order something else, or do you want to order again, right? And then you want to go back to the same dialogue and do that all over again. But what usually happens is like when you come back, so how people like kind of implement that is like you have a one dialogue. Let me show here a little bit. For example, I have, or it's a very basic. I'm just asking like what size and type of coffee and things like that, and then so after the order coffee is complete, what people do is like they will delegate back to interaction model to kind of create that loop coming back to the same dialogue. So after order is complete, API is invoked, you'll delegate back to the skill, and then you will render something like, hey, do you want to order again in your interaction model, intent handler, right? And then when user says yes, you kind of delegate back to Alexa conversation. But what happens is like when you delegate back to Alexa conversation, there is a context behind the scene that's lingering from the previous dialogue, right? So sometimes it will pick up the old slot values. So it will directly go to like, I have ordered again, right? Or sometimes it will predict out of domain. Basically, it never got trained on that behavior, like delegating out and coming back and starting the same dialogue over again. So there was no such pattern it got trained on. So that's why like it presented out of domain in those cases.
Yes, and one thing that I want to point out is I've done the other method of, or this method that Kavindra is talking about, where you delegate to from Alexa Conversations to your interaction model, and then from your interaction model to Alexa Conversations. And one thing that I had happen was I had an affirm that would like, or a confirm API that would say like, oh, so you would like a large, dark roast coffee or something like that, and it was. In the confirm, even if say I ordered a large coffee the first time, and then I ordered a small coffee the second time, when it would confirm the API, it would say, oh, would you like a large coffee? And I'd be like, wait, I said small. But if I said yes, in my skills backend, I got the small value. So it's like, okay, eventually it came through, it gave me the right thing, but the confirmation was incorrect. So it's confusing to the user.
Yeah.
And so Kavindra is showing here how you like do a complete flush.
Right. Yeah. So you, let me jump onto the screen a little bit. So basically, I have a kind of dialogue, and usually, let me delete this turn here. I'm gonna a little bit interactive. So usually, you will have a dialogue like this, right? So I want to order a black coffee and things like that, and you will collect all the slot values, and then there is a confirmation for the API that you want to invoke, and then user confirms. And then you will basically finish invoking the API, right? So that's essentially what's happening here. And in the code,
I think we lost him again.
Yep.
you will do. Hello.
Hey, welcome back.
Hey.
We lost you there for 10 seconds. It was you just got to the end. You were
Oh, wow.
explaining how to invoke your API, and then we kind of lost you.
Yeah, you
I
were
see.
about to go to the code tab.
Got it. Cool. So yeah, I was just showing. So when you receive an API, what like to kind of create the loop in the same dialog, right? So you want to ask user, hey, do you want to order again, right? So you will go and so in the API handler here, so you want to kind of delegate back to the same uh, dialog, uh, right? So what will happen in that case is like it will either carry over the slots or it will predict out of domain, as I said earlier. So a little trick to kind of like avoid that from happening is you just need to add like another turn here, and so you can say like it's the delegate turn or something like that, and you train the model to kind of invoke that same API again. So I'll explain a little bit why this is the case. So you can say success, and then do that, right? So basically, the behavior we are training, it's okay for model to receive this user event after an API is invoked, right? So from the backend, you will. So here we are delegating. Sorry, here we are delegating to an intent. So you come here, API is invoked, and then we delegate to an intent. So let's see. So in the intent world, right here. So you can say, okay, it's your order. Do you want anything else, right? So that's the loop, the bridge between the two orders, right? So you can render that, and if user says order another coffee, so you kind of capture that, and then you have to delegate back to Alexa conversation here, right? So this bridge we created on the intent side, it will bring back the user to Alexa conversation dialog. It's going to the same order black coffee dialog here. So right here, order black coffee, right? So when we add this last turn here again, it kind of trains the model to kind of treat that delegated request as a fresh request. So it won't it so basically it won't carry over the context when that happens. So that's kind of like a little trick to do that.
Gotcha.
Pizza skill, pizza reference also does that. So yeah, so you can do that to kind of clean the session or context.
Yeah, and so what you can kind of think of what's happening here, and Kavindra, you can step in if I'm off base, but like when you are in the middle of Alexa conversations and you delegate from Alexa conversations in your handler to the interaction model, you're essentially just like jettisoning out of Alexa conversations. And so this extra API success call, from what I understand, is like a way to say, hey, we're delegating out of here, but you also need to clear that context. And so that's what the point of having that second API success there, and it's literally going to the same API, right? The order black coffee. If you click on the one that says delegate. Oh, actually, wait.
Yeah.
I'm sorry.
Yeah.
I got that. I reversed that the way I described that. So when you say I have your order, that's where you are, actually going to do the work. You're not delegating from there. Then you're going to call the same API again, but in this case, you are delegating to Alexa conversations. So you're going to in your backend receive two requests, but it's going to be the second time that you actually do the delegation.
So in the backend, you will still receive one request. Let me explain a little bit how that
Sure.
works. So when you are kind of delegating here, so for every prediction, what happens is like Alexa Conversation first predicts the API to execute, and then it predicts what response it wants to render, right? And then it predicts like a user input event, which is kind of like waiting for user to answer, right? So it opens up the mic. So that's also a prediction that happens. We don't show it here, but that's kind of like the backend thing. So delegate out of here. So what essentially happens is like you are you are short circuit executing the API, but you kind of came out of that prediction loop. So it's basically you went through all the dialogue and then API was executed. So that's the pattern context saw so far. When you come back, it will see the Alexa turn again, right? Because when you come back, so it will be two Alexa turns back to back. So that's the pattern that dialogue never learned. So this adding this last step will help that kind of add that pattern in the learning training data. So that's kind of like the use case. I hope that explains a little bit.
Yes, and so actually Bondad had a question. So after the reset, would the filled slots be size 0 and type 0 again?
You mean no? So they won't carry the values. They will be size 0 and type 0, but the values will be fresh. So Alexa Conversation will ask what size and what coffee you want separately.
Yeah. So what I think Bondad is asking here is like in his backend code, would he have to look for those values? Those coming in, would they be the size? Because if you click on the last dialog there that says delegate, and you look at the values that you're sending over, if you expand that, yeah, so those are both going to size 0. You didn't like bump a counter. The only one that's been bumped up is that argument that gets passed to the response, the string literal 1. But that's technically never going to get called because you've delegated at that point.
Yeah, that's correct.
Makes sense.
So yeah.
Yeah. So let me see if I can run this demo a little bit.
All right, while you're getting that set up, Mame has asked, so both API success calls are identical?
That is correct. Yes.
The only difference being that the response that got passed to the template is different. If you notice, it got bumped up from string literal 0 to string literal 1. But because we've already delegated out of the conversation, that situation will never occur because we've short-circuited Alexa Conversations. And as Kavindra was saying, that is like adding that back-to-back call is just the way to train Alexa Conversations to know, okay, we're resetting this context here.
Got it.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so I'm going to run a demo.
Welcome to the best coffee shop. What do you want to order?
It's a very simple skill.
Decaf, light roast, medium roast or dark roast? What size?
So it's going through the same dialogue. You notice like the order has changed. So Alexa Conversation does not maintain the order. It's kind of flexible that way. So you can say like small.
Okay, a small decaf black coffee. Is that correct?
So here we are at this step. We are confirming the API, right? And then I can say yes. So that's where the API is getting invoked. And we are seeing some latency because of the Lambda. Essentially, so it will come in this API here.
So yeah, at that point,
not
it's going to delegate.
This API. Yes, it will delegate back to intent.
Right. And in your real world example, what you would want to do is you'd want to stage that information. So, you might be, adding it to a session variable that acts as a shopping cart or saving it into a database, something that your code is then going to be able to, when the user actually says check out, to be able to access and do all the things that you need to do to, perform
Okay.
that task on behalf of the user.
You can say order another black coffee because this skill is all about black coffee.
Okay. So here, so we invoke this API, order black coffee, right? And then as you see here, we are delegating to an intent, right? So when you invoke the API, we delegate it to an intent. And when we did that, we rendered that message here, right? So we did that, and now user can say, hey, order another coffee, right? So let me try doing that. Order another black coffee. So now it's going to come to this handler. And delegate back to Alexa conversation.
Yeah, one thing to note when you do the I want to speak over.
Sorry, you were saying something.
Yeah, one thing to do with when you delegate from Alexa interaction to Alexa conversations, that value. If you go back to right there on the screen where it says updated request and it says order black coffee, that utterance set needs to be associated with an invoke dialogue act. So if you try to delegate to something that is not associated with invoke, you will get a runtime error. So that's something to be aware of. That is a requirement, and it says so in the documentation. I shared the link to that earlier, but I'll share it again in the chat just because people may be joining late.
Yeah, it has to be an entry point to a dialogue. Usually, you will have invoke API as an entry point. So that's why you need to kind of start. You cannot start with request here when you are delegating entry of the dialogue or something like that.
So Mame asked another question. Do you think this workaround with your two success API calls, would that work if delegation was not to an intent but to Alexa conversations right away?
So that is something I'll have to check and confirm. I don't know answer to that off the top of my head because we have never I have personally never tried delegating back to back in the Alexa conversation at run set.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. We only have a couple minutes left, so I'd love to be able to put a nice shiny bow on this. Is there anything you guys want to leave people with? I know we talked about kind of the workaround we used for ending a session, and now this workaround for clearing our context. Is there anything else that we want to leave people with, or places we want them to go if they need more information? Maybe drop another link to the Slack just in case they haven't had an opportunity to find that before.
Yes, about to say, the Slack group is, I think, a very valuable resource. This demo that we created is a direct result of the feedback that we've received in that Slack group. So if you have any Alexa conversations related questions, I'm dropping the link in the chat right now. Join the Slack group. Kavindra, myself, and many other people at Amazon are very active in this group, answering your questions. Every Wednesday, we do an AMA session, so we have a dedicated hour time slot for answering your questions. And so, it's a great way to get your questions answered. And then not only are we in there answering questions, but you're also in there answering and helping each other as well, which I really, really enjoy. There's been a few times where I was in a meeting or something and I see a question come in and I'm like, oh, I'll answer this after a meeting. Then I'll come back and be like, oh, somebody's already answered this. And so I love seeing the interaction between the community. I like seeing people, meet each other, getting to know each other, forming teams and doing all of that stuff. So it's a very valuable resource for, for interacting with the community and finding people to collaborate with and to get your questions answered.
Cool. All right. So I think the lesson learned is keep asking your questions, join the Alexa Slack related to Alexa Conversations if you have questions. Tune in for the AMAs on Wednesdays, and keep charging forward. What is the new final deadline for submission?
The final submissions deadline has passed, but the certification deadline is September 30th. So if you've already submitted your skill and you've submitted your demo video, the last requirement is to get your skill certified. We do also in the Slack group have a dedicated channel called, I think it's #certification. Let me look at that real quick to make sure I've got that correct. Yes, #certification. If you join that channel and you have a certification related question, if you have some like, oh, I don't understand what this particular feedback item means, we have Jeremy Hill from the certification team in there answering your questions and helping you with your certification related questions. So I would highly recommend you go in there and ask him about your Alexa Conversations related certification questions, so that way you can get your skill certified by the September 30th deadline.
Perfect. All right, well, thank you guys for being here today. Thank you for sharing all this. I think this is super, super cool. And thank you to all of you in the chat that were asking questions. This is why we're here. We want to make sure that we're answering questions that you guys have. I know that Mon Howard mentioned that this session was timely. Thank you for paying attention to what's going on in the Slack channel. That makes us feel really good. We're trying so hard to make sure that you guys have the information you need when you need it. And in many cases, this is new to us too. So we have to make sure that we're staying on top of it and working with the product team, folks like Kavindra, to make sure that we can share all this information as broadly as we can to make sure you guys can succeed. So with that, for Justin and Kavindra, I'm Jeff. Thank you guys all for tuning in today. I'm sure we'll be back on here again very soon, but in the meantime, take care. Have a good weekend.
All right. Thank you.
Bye.
Bye, everybody.